Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome again to another Facebook live session. So we're just going out on Facebook today, just so we can interact with you a little bit better, ask you a few questions and polls and so on. And the first poll, fingers crossed, we're going to try and launch, is how many of you watching currently are actually using Capture One? So that would be good if you could answer that. Just give us an idea of who is using our software and who's interested to learn more about it as well. So you should see that pop up on screen at any moment, and then we can have a look at your answers. Now, in the meantime, what we're going to do today, while we just let you guys have a chance to answer that poll, what we're going to do today, bit of narcissism here, we're actually going to edit a photo of me, which was shot by Peter Hurley, out at the WPPI show in Las Vegas. So he shot this of me on the show floor, did a great job, of course, because he's really the master of doing these headshots. So what I'm going to do is we're going to edit this, and in particular we're going to actually focus on using the Skintone tool. So this guy here, and what the Skintone tool does is really help to sort of even up any variations in skin that everybody has, but it's a really great, easy, quick way to just take out those variations without having to use an external editor or anything like that. Now, talking about external editors, we're actually going to do a round trip into an external editor, and we're going to do that in Affinity Photo, just because someone asked about that the other week. And rather than just show Photoshop as an option, let's also look at something else. So without further ado, I shall just get rid of my face for a second, and we have a look at this shot. So first of all, this is how it looks out of camera. This is after I did a few adjustments and edit earlier today. So let's have a look first of all what we can do. Now, Peter got this pretty bang on out of camera, as you can see. This was actually the first shot he took as well, which was even more impressive. Certainly to the crowd who was watching, you thought it was a different person on camera to the one that they were looking in front of them as well. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But anyway, exposure's pretty spot on. I might just bring up the midtones a little bit with the brightness slider, ever so slightly. Add a little bit more contrast. And let's just put in a tiny bit of clarity. I don't mind it being a bit more harsh and contrasty as it's me. So it really doesn't need much of those kind of basic adjustments. And I might just warm it up a little bit with a touch more white balance as well. So a few simple corrections. Let's just take that down a little bit. Yeah, let's do something like that. Now, what we're focusing on today is the Skintone tab of the Advanced Color Editor. So the color editor is split up into these three sections: the basic, advanced, and Skintone. And really the Skintone is kind of an extension of the advanced tab, but it's really designed to deal just with skin tones. So we're going to just have a look and see exactly how we can even my rugged face off. This was after 3 days of being in Vegas, which is probably why I'm looking a little bit on the peaky side. So first of all, actually before we get that, let's see if we can do anything with my tired face. Or we'll come back to that at the end actually. So we'll do that at the end. So let's put up a new filled layer, and this is going to be our Skintone layer. Now, the reason why I'm going to do this on a layer is that you'll see in a second. So if we press M on our keyboard, that's just showing me that the whole image is masked now, indicated in red. So whatever adjustment I do, it's going to affect the whole photo. Now over here, going back to our color editor, we're going to use the Skintone tool, as I said, to do some evening up. Now the way the Skintone tool works is to first take this color picker, go over to your shot and decide what your reference skin tone is. So that's really important. So what we're looking for is the skin tone that you want to normalize to. So I wouldn't pick up here, for example, because that's kind of red and tired and so on. I wouldn't go over here because it's too bright and really not the best color. So I'm kind of looking around here somewhere because that's the kind of tone I want. It's the kind of luminosity I want. It is the target skin tone. So that's the best way to think about it. Okay, so if we click here, what you'll see in the advanced color editor or in the skin tone editor is a sort of sample selection. So this is the color range that's been picked. Now what my goal is to expand this out a little bit, and this way is the saturation range, this way is the color range, and then that little dot, the dot that you see in kind of the middle of the triangle of the skin tone editor, that was my target skin tone. So that's the one that I want to kind of spread everywhere, or be the target skin tone to normalize all the bad colors too, if you like. So that's important. So the first thing is that we've picked our skin tone. Now the next thing is down here, we've got some sliders called Uniformity, and up the top here, we've got some amount sliders like so. Now the amount sliders, if we pull these around, all that's going to do, if you see there, that's just going to change the saturation, for example, of the target color. So it's not going to do anything clever, it's just going to change the saturation. So you can see my skin tone getting small or less saturated and more saturated. So that's just really editing the range that you see in this wheel. Lightness, we could make it a little bit darker, or we can make it a bit brighter as well. Now these sliders, they actually have a smaller range than the advanced tab. So they're designed to be sort of very critical, because skin tone, we don't want to make massive changes. We just want some finesse. So they're designed to have, if you like, a shorter range so that their adjustment is much less dramatic. Okay, so now the clever bit is when we come to uniformity. So watch what happens when we drag these sliders across. So if we bring hue all the way to the right, now notice you see my lips have changed color. So if we go back to 0 and we go back to 100, everything has now been transformed to the dot. So same for saturation and same for lightness, like so. Now lightness I don't want to touch, because then I'm going to ruin all Peter Hurley's nice lighting. So we're going to leave that as there is. And then saturation we're going to put around here. But now, of course, the keen-eyed amongst you are going to say, well, that's no good because it's affecting the color of the lips, for example, which is true. So the fact that I've done this on a filled layer is kind of the key. So remember, we've got the layer over the whole shot. But changing these sliders allows me to dial in the sort of correct skin tone that I want to have. Now, if you're not happy with the target skin tone, there's nothing, of course, you just picking it again. So we could just go over here and think, actually, maybe it's better around this area or something like that. So you can pick again if you need to. Now, there's only one pick in the skin tone tool. So the advanced tool, there's up to 30, but the skin tone is just designed to have one pick. So if you're not happy, you can always adjust again. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger, and then you can see what's going on. So we need to fix this issue, of course, that it's changing areas that we don't want it to change. So what I'm going to do is right click on my skin tone layer and choose clear mask, like so. Now I can grab my brush, and then we can brush in my correction wherever I want it to be. Now, first of all, we're going to right click and just have a look at those settings. I don't want pen pressure on, so let's turn that off. So size and hardness, that's, you know, we want a kind of a nice soft brush. We don't want any hard edges, if you like. So we want to keep the brush nice and soft. And also we want to keep the flow relatively low. And as you would have seen in other live broadcasts, this simply means that when I move the brush back and forth, it's going to build up the mask slowly. So areas of my tired old face that need more treatment, I can brush more, and areas that are, you know, pretty good, then we don't have to do as much. So if we do a little bit of brushing around here, like so, then we can do so. And then we can move up to this point, just clean up those areas, like so. And then that just helps to even up. Now you're probably thinking not a great deal is happening at the moment, but you can just see where the mask is. And we can go a little bit down over here and just complete here. Now if we zoom in a bit, whoa, too close. It's not nice looking at yourself this close up. If we turn the skin tone layer off and turn it back on again, then it just gets rid of that kind of pinky reddish tone or whatever. And then we can clean up over here as well. So that's just a really simple, easy technique. All of you can do that. It's not difficult. Be a lot harder to do it in Photoshop or Affinity Photo or whatever. So if we turn that off and on again, like so. Now, if you want to, you can move your target color around, and this really shows you what this tool is doing. So if I was to grab this point and then move it over here, for example, then it changes, if you like, the skin tone color. So you can see exactly what's happening by moving that target around. So it's normalizing everything in that wedge. So normalizing everything in that triangle to that particular picked point. So you can really set the sort of skin tone that you want to get to, either by moving it sort of manually like that, or of course you can always just do another pick and then make sure you expand everything else. Now, yes, Joel, I saw that question. It is hard to see the difference on a small screen, but again, it is only designed to be subtle. So for example, let's do, if we say image, we're going to say clone that variant. So we're going to bring the two up side by side like so. And then on this one, we're just going to turn that skin tone layer off like so. So if you look here at the difference and here, then it's just taking out that sort of tinge like so. Now, depending how even or uneven the skin tone is, you're going to see more of a change. Now, quite often people's hands, if you've got hands up in a shot or something like that, you can probably even see it on my webcam to some extent. But skin tone color is also varies a lot between arms, limbs, face, and so on and so forth. So this is another way of bringing the skin tone closer as well. Now, what you can also do if you think you've overcooked it, let's just get rid of one of those. If you think you've overcooked it or it's not quite enough, you can always bring the opacity down of your layer as well, just to make it a little bit, more subtle too. So skin tone correction, super simple in Capture One, but we're not done yet because I did promise a bit of a round trip as well. And there's also another thing we can do. Let's take some years off, hopefully. Let's add a new heel layer like so. I'm going to grab a brush. And what we're going to try and do is just reduce the sort of difference in tone here. So if I hold my Alt key down, and let's go around here. And then what we can do is just mask a little bit under the eye here. Now, when we take the mask away, it's going to look pretty awful because you can see a bit of my nose. But if we take the opacity down, then we can just blend in a little bit of brighter skin tone just to take the edge off like that. So that's the left eye. And then we could also do another heel layer just over here for the right eye. So let's Alt click, that picks the source point. And then we can do a subtle, let's just bring the mask in. Whoops, managed to move it. Something like that. You would maybe spend a bit more time. Let's just move that over there. So if we're looking for similar sort of skin tone, and let's bring that down a bit. And then again, take the opacity down because that doesn't look very believable, but then we can just take the edge off a little bit like that as well. So sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes you don't have enough data to pick from to sort of get a good effect, but at least in this case, it just takes the edge off a bit, make me feel a bit better about myself, if you like. So we've done that, and we've done that, like so, just to reduce that a little bit. Now, the next stage that we might want to do, of course, in this kind of workflow is just to bounce out to an external editor, do some retouching, and so on and so forth. You can see in Capture One, we've done those simple heel layers just to help my tired old face a little bit. But all the kind of little spotting, blemishing, or advanced retouching makes more sense to do in an external editor. So how do we do that? So what we're going to do is right click here and say Edit With. Now there's an edit with and an open with, so it's important to know the difference between the two. So if we say edit with, we're always going to create an additional file. So that's going to be a TIFF or a JPEG, PSD file or something like that. Now if we say open with, that's going to purely take the file that I've right clicked on and open it in the application of my choice. So that's the difference between the two. So edit with always makes an additional file. And we're going to do a little trick when we round trip is also to get two versions. We're going to have a color and a black and white version. So let's say in this time, because we had a little comment last week, you always show Photoshop. I want to see Affinity Photo. So I went ahead and downloaded the trial, and I've spent about 15 minutes using it. So for those of you who are experienced on Affinity Photo, I apologize if I get it wrong, but we're just going to grab a TIFF, 8-bit is fine, Adobe RGB, and let's say edit. So what Capture One will do is now save that TIFF file and open it straight into Affinity Photo. Now it was very quick, as you can see, but the TIFF file has now been placed here like so. So this was the one that we were editing, and here's my TIFF file like so. So I'm just going to pre-prepare ourselves and zoom in for a second. And now we're going to retouch this, for example. Now I'm not going to spend ages in Affinity Photo because this is a Capture One demo, but let's make a new layer. And it took me a while to find it because it has a funny name compared to Photoshop. But I'm going to use, where is it? This one, the In Painting Brush Tool. So all that allows me to do is just to pick off little things like that. Now I'm on a retouching layer, so I just have to make sure I'm sampling the layer below as well. And then we're just going to pick off like typical things that we might want to retouch. And as I said, I'm not going to spend ages doing this. I just want to show you a little neat workflow with Capture One. So let's get rid of some of the hairs, which I'm kind of losing anyway. And these kind of blemishes that you might just want to quickly retouch like so. And this, and this, and this, and so on. So I'm happy with my retouching job, the super speedy one that it was. And now we're just going to save this out. So I'm going to hit Command S on my keyboard and say save with layers, because I want to keep this layer. So I want to keep my layered TIFF intact in case I need to go back and do any other retouching. Now this workflow that we're doing, identical in Photoshop. So save with layers, just do the same thing in Photoshop as well. So let's say save with layers. That's going to take a while. Now if we go back to Capture One, let's just peek down here and see what happens. So we're looking at our TIFF. So the TIFF is going to complete like so. Capture One's going to rebuild the preview, and then you saw those few retouching bits disappear like so. So what we can do, let's just close this shot down for a second. Let's go back into this one. And then now what we can do is, so we've got our final retouched color version, if you like. What if I want a black and white? Well, I can make a virtual copy in Capture One. So I can say clone variant like so, and that will give me a virtual TIFF copy. Now we're not editing the raw file here, but if we're not doing tons of edits, then it doesn't matter, because we've got enough data in the TIFF file. Now if this was a 16-bit TIFF, that would be even better. But let's just do a quick change to black and white. So I've got my color version and I've got my black and white version. We could still do some edits to this if we wanted to as well. Let's just tweak a couple of sliders and so on. So, but the point is we've got our color version and we've got our black and white version. Now I've just spotted that I have missed a little retouching bit here that I wanted to do. So what I can do now is use the other command, open with Affinity Photo like so. So now if I say Affinity Photo again, it's going to open that back up with my layered TIFF. I can fix my mistake over here. So let's grab my in-painting tool again. Let's fix that. Oops, I need to be on current layer and below. So let's fix that little error there. Let's fix something else. So that's also obvious. A couple more of those and so on. So you can see you can move pretty quick between different applications. Let's get rid of those so it's really, whoops, let's undo that one. There we go. So now if we say save, go back to Capture One, let's just see the progress bar here. Watch over here, and then you'll see that disappear once it's completed saving. Capture One will rebuild its preview, and there we go. Now the cool thing is, because this is a variant, so the TIFF is a variant, if we go to the black and white, that's also has the same retouching in there as well. So I haven't got to do the same job twice. We could even do another variant of a color one, do a different color grading and so on. And yes, I know you're on the TIFF, but there's enough data in there just to do those kind of minor things like make a black and white. Now to finish this kind of workflow off, let's say we want to save these out, my color and black and white. Now I'd like to have a JPEG and I'd like to have a, let's just say a TIFF, for example. Not that I'm going to print myself out. It's narcissistic enough doing your own photo, let alone printing pictures of yourself out. Anyway, so we're going to have a JPEG and we're going to have a TIFF. So these are process recipes which you can predefine. That's a whole other sort of broadcast we could do, idea for next week, which defines your output. So JPEGs, TIFFs, and so on. So I want to have a JPEG. So that's going to be a JPEG. And I also want to have a TIFF, which is 2 different sizes. Now, if we go to our JPEG and look under adjustments and we zoom to 100%, what we can ask Capture One to do is by hitting the proofing button, we can simulate what it's going to look like once it's exported. Now this has resized it down to 2048 pixels by turning this proofing button on and off. And what we can also do is say, because I'm resizing the shot, it's getting smaller, that's going to have a negative effect on the sharpness. So we can add some output sharpening for screen and decide how much we want to have. So that will throw in a bit of extra sharpening for that reduction in size. Now, when we go to the A3 print, that's going to be somewhat bigger because Capture One will calculate the resolution it needs to be at 40 centimeters at 300 dpi. So then Capture One will figure out what the pixel dimension should be. Now, again, we can now add some output sharpening for print, and then that will add a little bit of sharpening in for those dimensions. Now, the cool thing is under here is that we can also say to Capture One, put the photos in a folder based on their recipe name and also rename them based on their recipe name. So we're going to have 2 different folders, 2 different file names, nicely divided up. So let's have a look at where these are sitting. So they're going to go into this folder and we're going to say process. Straight away there's our JPEG, nice and quick, as you can see. Resized to, should be 2048 pixels. And then now we've got our TIFF at 300 dpi for those dimensions which Capture One figured out needed to be those pixel dimensions, each in their own folder, like so. Nice and simple. How easy is that? So there we go. Let's have a look at some questions as well before we throw another poll at you as well. 1 second. Alan was asking, when you clear the filled layer, are you not just adjusting the base layer? If so, why create the filled layer? Well, if we go back to the shot that we changed, which one was it? It was this one, I believe. So we have our skin tone layer. So the whole point, let's just do the process again by making a filled layer, which is over the whole image. Just allows us to see what the corrections are doing. So let's say we wanted to brighten the eyes a little bit. So remember, it's on the whole layer, so I could think, how am I going to brighten these eyes? Let's bring up the brightness a bit, maybe add a bit more contrast and maybe a bit more exposure. So I'm on the filled layer so I can see exactly what's going on. Now when I right click Alan and say clear mask, all I'm doing is getting rid of the mask, but I'm keeping those adjustments that I think are going to be right. Now I can grab my brush and with a nice low flow again, I can just brush in those parameters as much as I feel is necessary. So now if I turn this layer on and off, you can see what it's doing like so. And just need to fix that little bit there, for example. So that's the point of the filled layer first approach. It's actually, I picked up from Pratik, one of our ambassadors, who's a retoucher, and that's kind of his methodology in Photoshop for some things. So that's the benefit of doing it like that. Would you recommend that way to dodge and burn, or is it more a preference thing? Yeah, for dodging and burning, I do the same thing. So I make a filled layer, brighten it to what I feel is good for the parts that I want to do, clear it, and then brush it back in. So yes. Can you copy the adjustments from the skin tone layer to other images without the mask itself? No, when you copy a layer across, so if we just go to number, this is a different shot for example, if we wanted to copy those layers across, I could hit the copy and apply button and I could decide which ones I wanted, like so. Let's say just the skin tone one. So if we say apply and we look at this shot, it has the skin tone, but it will have the mask as well. Now I can either move the mask a little bit or I can just brush it where it needs to be, but it will unfortunately be mask and adjustments, but you can always edit the mask or clear the mask or whatever. Harold says, if I'm using Photoshop, do you prefer TIFF or PSD? You know what, there's not much sort of disadvantage to using TIFF. Those Photoshop experts watching will know better than me, but there's not really a great deal of difference sort of between the two. One of them is more efficient in terms of file size, but I can't remember which one that is. But layered TIFFs have just as much functionality for the kind of things that we were looking at here as well. How do you know when you edit that you don't go over the top? It's difficult actually, because I'm sure certainly when I edit shots, if I would take this picture and then edit the day after, it could look totally different, especially with things like landscapes and travel shots. It's very rare they look the same day after day. So that's difficult. But I think trying to keep it subtle, if you like, and just not, not too contrasty, not too crazy colors, not over sharpened. Those are the things that tend to look over edited as well. So, but it's tricky. But keep an eye on those things. So not too contrasty, not over saturated like mad, not over sharpened. That tends to be, the indicators of over editing as well. But it's a great question. Like, if I said that right, so can you explain dodge and burn? Maybe we'll do that next week, actually. Dodge and burn, very simply, is just selective brightening, selective darkening of different areas of the photo. So for example, if I felt this area was too bright, like this part, I might just decide to just take that down a bit, or I might lighten this side of the face a little bit, and so on. So we can do that with layers and masking, as you said before, but that's actually a good subject for next week, maybe, I would think. There was a good feedback actually from, let's see, it flashed past my eyes. Wesley, that was it. PSD is more efficient in terms of file size. There you go. Thanks, Wesley. So layered TIFF has the functionality, but PSD is more efficient in file size. Now, when it comes to Affinity, what I did discover in my sort of 10-minute little crash course of it is that it can open a PSD file, but as far as I could tell, correct me if I'm wrong, you couldn't save a PSD file back again. But a layered TIFF worked fine, and that round trip worked nicely with Capture One. But if you're using Photoshop, you can round trip with a PSD as well. Okay, now I think I'll just answer a couple more questions, and then we've got our final poll that we want to throw up with you as well. Could we do a demo with Helicon focus and focus stacking? We could actually. It's a great tool actually. So if you're doing product work or stacking landscapes, we can round trip with Helicon as well. So that's something else we could also do in the future as well. Oh, Steve says you need to export as PSD in Affinity. I couldn't actually find that option when I looked, but as I said, maybe I wasn't looking hard enough, for example. So I'll have to look into that, Steve. But if you can do that and you can export a PSD, great. You could do PSD and TIFF as well. Okay, so we're going to finish off with another poll. So we'll get that up there on screen as well. And then the second question that we wanted to ask, based on what you've seen today, of course, don't change your mind now, but skin tone correction, like what we did with the skin tone tool, is that something that you do in Capture One, or is it something that you don't do in Capture One? Because it could be that you haven't seen how to do it yet, of course. But it's interesting to know, is that something you do periodically in Capture One, or have you never seen that before and you've always relied on something else? So just a simple yes and no answer as well, of course. So there we go. Okay, now while that poll is coming up, I'll just check on a few other questions. Maher was asking, do you use auto adjustment as a start point to finish? Sometimes actually, because the auto adjust can work really well. Now, if you guys are around tomorrow, so we have a webinar tomorrow as well, twice. So one in the morning, one in the afternoon, European time. And one of the shots that I picked out for that actually works really nicely on auto as a really good start point. So just because auto is, you maybe think isn't such a great idea, doesn't mean that you shouldn't try with it. So if we take this same shot and we say new variant, now the difference between those two, I saw someone ask, is a new variant will just make a copy of the virtual copy of the raw file. So it doesn't actually copy data, it's just a virtual copy with no adjustments. Clone variant will do a virtual copy with the current adjustments that we have on the file. So if I do new variant, this gives me number 4, and we say auto adjust, doesn't do quite a good job in that case. So it's kind of misjudged the exposure, probably because of the dark area, for example. But if we bring the exposure back down, then it's not too bad. So I think with those things, and it brought up the shadows because it's fooled by the dark area. So depending what sort of environment the picture is in, sometimes auto can work really well. But it doesn't take you any time to just click auto adjust, and if it's no good, Command R to reset and start again. But one of the shots I'm going to edit tomorrow on the webinar works really nicely with auto adjust. It's kind of pretty much bang out the gate. But this one with its low key lighting, looking at the histogram as well, that's going to fool the auto adjust. But auto levels, exactly, Travis, I just saw you saying there's no reason why auto levels in here wouldn't work quite nicely as well. So auto everything depends. Auto levels is just a really quick way to set those level points. And finally, from Angelique, you copied a layer, but how do you apply it to the other photo? So let's go back to this one and let's kind of bring those up. Let's just reset the layers on that one. There's nothing there. So if we get this one, we can say copy, decide the layers that we want to have, and then down here you can say apply, like so. Now if you always want all the layers, you can just do a shift click on the little up down arrow, and that will do everything. You can see the help bubble if we stick the arrow just in the right spot. The little help bubble that comes up, which is not going to come up now. There we go. So it says hold option to suppress the dialog box. So it just does a quick copy and apply, shift to apply immediately. So there's a couple of shortcuts that there you can do as well. Okay, sorry for those of you who couldn't necessarily see the poll. They were popping up on Mac, but I don't think they were coming up on some instances of iOS. So if you missed the polls, I'm sorry. But thanks to those of you who have answered as well. But it could be a privacy setting. That's a good point, Travis. All right, thank you very much again for joining today. It's definitely an uplifting part of my day to chat to you guys when we're all stuck at home. Gives me a reason to have a shave and put a clean shirt on as well. So so thanks for joining us once more. Come back on Friday, same time. We've got a couple of guests, Emily Teague and Brandy Nicole, two photographers from the US who are going to join me on Friday. Webinar tomorrow, which you can sign up for as well. That's on our page, learn.capture1.com. You'll see all the webinars there which are coming up. So when the end screen comes up, you can see the link there as well to get to our webinars. Actually, I will just be efficient and type that in as well, learn.capture1.com. So that should be coming up on the comments too. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you all again in the future, and I hope that was useful. Sorry you had to look at my face for the duration, but it was just a good example of what's possible in a round trip scenario. So take care all, and see you all soon. Bye now.